Well, a big theme that I've been talking about this week is sort of the lull in the stock market decline, and the way in which that the moves each day have not been nearly as big. The amplitude has been reduced every day this week compared to the last couple weeks, and so I interpreted that as a bit of a support zone at 2450, because we got down, basically we crashed as far as low as we did in December of 2018, with that whole issue that resulted in the Fed flip-flop, which prevented us from entering a recession at that time, which, by the way, we almost did. The Fed still had some room to cut, though. Because we were going back then, the Fed was popping the bubble. Just for a recap, the Fed back in 2018 popped the bubble by raising interest rates, which again was totally foreseeable. But anyway, they were able to save it by reversing course and very quickly going gung-ho and cutting rates and restarting not QE and all that. And that's where we were ended up before this current crash. But anyway, so after we got down to that level in this current crash, there's been some hesitation. Now, I don't think it's safe to say that the support held, because we've been operating in that range of the bottom, but on the lower end of that. Kind of the 2018 lows have served as really a ceiling this week. It's now resistance, at least it would appear to me, but that's not to say that it can't break out above it at some point, because this has been a very, very steep decline. There's got to be some relief rally at some point. The shorts have to cover at some point. Or at least you would think. It is possible, like we've seen, for things to just go straight down. And so, I was actually surprised at the end of today. I wasn't shocked necessarily that the market is down quite a bit, and that today really, we didn't quite peak at the open, but we're pretty far below the open today. After the early morning, in which you had some of a pickup, a slight rally, back, of course, to 2450, and then bounced right off of it. We bounced off of 2450 on the S&P maybe 3 times, I think. But then, throughout the day, the trend was definitely lower, and we ended up right around 2300. Now, the interesting thing to me is that this week, despite the lower amplitude, we had lower percentage moves every day. Back in the week before, we had double-digit percentage moves. We had limit up, limit down, day after day. It seemed like, and that kind of was becoming the new normal. But then this week, we weren't really hitting limit up and limit down so much. And if we did, we didn't make it really into the double-digit zone so much. At least we didn't close there. Despite that, however, this was actually the worst week of the decline so far in terms of actual points lost. Because it felt really violent these last couple weeks. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of the violent down days were followed by equally violent up days, and so a lot of those very extreme losses were not compounded day after day. But this week, even though the declines were not as steep on the days that they were down, the relief days, the up days, were not nearly as high either. But the difference was greater. So the declines overall ended up being higher. We lost about 400 points on the S&P this week. That's massive. And considering that the New York Stock Exchange will be shut down starting on Monday, there will be no more floor traders to try and moderate things, to try and wait to open the markets until certain times, to try and focus to favor things to get quote unquote the right price at the open. There seems to be rumors going around, these are unconfirmed as of yet, that things next week that we may be living in a totally different world next week. And it seems to me that the news that is likely to come down this Sunday is not going to be bullish for futures. Let's just put it that way. Some of you might be hearing, in fact, it's kind of hard to find stuff on the internet. Of course, on the internet, it's not really that reliable, but at least where I am living locally, there is a rumor spreading that, if you know anyone who's in the National Guard, in many, many states, including the one I'm in, the National Guard's being called up, and they seem to be under the impression, at least the folks that I've talked to, that they will be working to manage a lockdown that's going to start here on Sunday. Now, of course, California God, I didn't even mention this. Things are happening so fast. Last night, California went on lockdown. Now, as of yet, the Governor Gavin Newsom is not calling it martial law, which is interesting. It seems like the city of Los Angeles is under like martial law to where they are actually enforcing it, and the mayor is saying, hey, if you leave your house, you're getting arrested, and all you people going out and buying guns, we're going to stop you. You crazy people, you can't have guns. Eric Garcetti, the mayor of LA, seems to be, much more down that road. Gavin Newsom, the governor, did not seem that extreme in his language. That, he was saying, hey, we're requiring that you stay home, but if you go out, we're not going to throw you in a gulag or a koof camp or jail or something like that. But of course, it's a very, very small step from, hey, we're not enforcing it that strongly to we're going to enforce this very strictly. That's a small step to make once you've already declared, that you've got that lockdown order. Cuomo today took another step further. He shut down all non-essential businesses. The same thing, of course, that Pennsylvania has already done. Ohio, I think, took a similar move. Illinois, their governor has issued a shelter-in-place order, which is what they're calling it. And again, shelter-in-place is language that you use, like with hurricanes. But they're really saying, hey, you have to stay in your home. That's what shelter-in-place means. And again, even if they don't have the ability, which again is all I really think that they're worried about, the ability to enforce this, it is coming. They're going to try and enforce it as best they can. That's why in LA they can be more strict about this, because LA, people are more densely populated. It's a very densely populated area, so it's easier to keep people under control because they're concentrated in smaller areas. When you spread out and you get into suburbs and especially rural areas, very hard to have enough resources, without getting spread so thin that you can't actually keep people locked down in their homes. And so once California came out and said it and finally did a statewide lockdown, you could be damn sure that it's going to start rolling out in other states. Just like how when I think it was Ohio on Sunday, okay, it hasn't even been a full week yet. First, it closed all the bars and restaurants. You knew that was coming everywhere else. So it seems to me, foregone conclusion that the lockdown, the countdown to the lockdown has started. It's just a matter of when the exact date will be. For whatever reason, people seem to think it's Sunday. That's what a lot of people are talking about. Of course, earlier this week, I think I told you guys about what I had heard from some folks, some actual real people that I know, that the Florida government is going to be shutting down the interstate. Closing it at the state borders, because Florida, unique to most states, is largely surrounded by water, not by other states. So it's actually pretty possible to close down our highways and seal the state in, because our population centers are nowhere near the borders with other states. So there's not going to be heavy traffic around there. It's not like we have any cities right on the border. You could just shut down I-95, I-75, and I-10, and then all the little roads that probably cross the border, with relatively little resistance and little disruption. Especially if businesses and things are already shutting down and commerce is slowing, and there's going to be less traffic on the road. Now, again, why exactly they'd want to do that, I don't know, but I would, other than the fact that with a national lockdown, you certainly aren't going to be having interstate travel. And so at first I got the impression that this was something that the state of Florida was going to do, which didn't make much sense to me, but in conjunction with all the other states, in instituting a national lockdown to where everyone is cooped up, where they're from, probably within their own county, let alone their own state. That seems to make more sense to me now. Calling up the National Guard when we've just, and seeing them amass in places. And by the way, it's not just here where I am. There's people. Now, the problem is I'm not going to link any of the videos, because a lot of these, I'm going to tell you, if you're going to see videos of Humvees and things on trains, are going to be not necessarily fake, but incorrect. They're going to be from different times. They're not necessarily recent videos. I'm seeing the same video, for example, attributed to multiple cities. I've seen it attributed to people saying it was Long Island, people saying it was Jacksonville, people saying it was Miami, people saying it was Boynton Beach, people saying it was other places. Of course, there's also one that seems to be getting a little more traction that I think is somewhat more credible, because it's only being attributed to Chicago. People are downplaying that one, saying well, there's a lot of trains that go through Chicago, so of course you see lots of Humvees. But with all this going on, I mean, how naive can you be to think that they're just moving resources around for no reason. Because of course you see Humvees, it's probably going to be National Guard, not the U.S. military, because the U.S. military, I believe, uses all MRAPs now. They pretty much phased the Humvees out, I believe. So your Humvees are things that they give in aid to other countries and things that the National Guard gets. It's kind of like the M16A2. I think that if you go into the Army National Guard, you probably are issued an M16 rather than an M4. At least that's the way things were in the past. So you see, guys, with this hand-me-down equipment. So once that there's a national lockdown, I think that any chance for a short-term rally is going to be quashed. If we go into Sunday evening futures, not to be confused with Sunday morning futures, the show on Fox News, which I have to confess I've never seen, but I do know it exists. You have to keep track with these Sunday shows somewhat, because President Trump does love them so much, so they do influence him. So they're an important thing to at least keep an eye on, because old people seem to like the Sunday morning news shows. I'm not really sure why. I'm never really in the mood to watch news on Sunday morning. But anyway, if when futures open Sunday night at 6 o'clock, or is it 6:30? No, it's 6 o'clock, I'm pretty sure. I don't think that there's going to be much hope for the start of a relief rally to happen in the overnight markets that can lead us into Monday. If you've already got the S&P at 2,300, but the whole country is just shut down. I think at that point we're certainly going to break out of this 2,300 to 2,450 range that we've been in this week, for much of this week, I should say. Things are still moving quickly. This is relative stability that we've experienced over the last couple days. I think that we're going to break out of that range to the downside if all of a sudden you have all these lockdowns coming. And again, maybe it won't be all 50 states, because as I've said from the beginning, the reason why you can't do even China didn't do a full national quarantine. They didn't quarantine the entire country. They just did Wuhan, select cities. I think they eventually moved to do the entire province. Hubei or Hubei, however you pronounce that, the province that Wuhan is in, and then a couple other places. It was a very concentrated and a handful of places that they did their quarantines. This whole thing that the Europeans are doing with national quarantines, I guess might work to a certain extent. I mean, maybe they call them national quarantines. I just don't see how you enforce that in rural areas unless your people are just so complacent, or your population really is just that dense to where they're you don't really have much in the way of rural population to worry about. But here in the United States, if you look at a map of it, vast majority of the country is low population density. And so sure, you might be able to lock down Chicago, LA, New York, San Francisco, Miami, but Atlanta. But what about these other places? What even about moderate density places, your suburban areas in which gun laws tend to be laxer than, say, inner cities. And of course, the people are spread out more. It takes more resources, again, to spread out the National Guard to keep people in. What if somebody goes nuts and they don't want to be kept in, and then they end up getting killed, but somebody records it on their cell phone, posts it on Twitter? Again, all the scenes that we were seeing coming out of Wuhan when China started the lockdown, people kicking and screaming, being thrown into the back of vans and taken off to the Kuf camp. I just don't see how any of this lockdown, ends well for the U.S. government. I don't see how it's in their interests. And, another thing that really hurt a lot of people today, I guess at least the sentiment of a lot of people. I don't know necessarily that it had a big impact on the market. I guess the efficient markets hypothesis people probably think that it had a big impact on the market. But these experimental treatments that we've been hearing about, which again were first raised like a month ago in China, but are now getting play because of some study by a French doctor, as they're being floated as an idea as possible treatment. Dr. Fauci, Anthony Fauci, was asked about this at the press conference today, for the White House does every day, and he completely shot that down and said, "Oh yeah, that's hogwash. That's not going to do anything for anybody. That that study was totally flawed. There's no evidence that that's going to have any impact. I mean, sure, we'll try it. We can do trials, but it's not. You shouldn't hold out your hope for that." And people were a little taken aback by that. They were hoping, the media was looking for kind of a bright spot in their narrative. and he totally shot that down. So that again would just seem to justify the White House taking more extreme measures to just stop the spread of this, if there is no hope for really treating it. So, back to the topic of the lockdown. If you've got anything left really that you need to buy, like I was thinking the other day, I should get some oil, just general purpose oil for lubricating things, because we're not going to be able to get out to get things if you're under quarantine. I don't think that the stores would necessarily. I mean, maybe if they've got Walmart open because it's a grocery store, you could go and buy anything at Walmart. I guess that'd be nice. But we might get to the point to where if they are able to have enough infrastructure in certain areas, you're not going to be able to go to the store because they're just going to have everything that you need delivered by the military. They will set up a supply chain that flows directly through the military under martial law, which again, they're talking about this in California. So if they're talking about it in California, it's going to come to the rest of the country. And of course, Cuomo today made it clear that the states that he's looking at that he wants to basically coordinate the lockdown with: New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and Delaware, I think, or is it? That's 5. And so states with a lot of people and a lot of percentage of the U.S., a big chunk of the U.S. population is going to be living under these rules very, very soon. With that said, we'll know on Sunday one way or the other, because I don't know why, but a lot of people seem to have that data. I don't know if it's just mass hysteria, which you do get in these situations where there's very low information. There's a lot of shady stuff going on by the government. Rumors like this could just take off for no reason. Nobody knows how they get started, and they might be completely false. So hopefully, we have longer than just Sunday. But if that's the case, better be safe than sorry. So with that said, if you get anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day, and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.